Morning. It's a blessing that we get to be here this morning, and it's always a blessing anytime we get to come together. We have an opportunity to worship God. I'm so thankful for times like this because we have a chance to not only be able to glorify God, but we also have an opportunity to be able to be children of His and to be able to worship God as His children. We have an opportunity to edify one another and to spend time with each other. Encouraging it should be when we're together. It's been an exciting study for me. We've gotten to have an opportunity to study through the book of Ruth. We have had an opportunity to glean things from the book of Ruth that were special, that would apply to our lives, and would give us an opportunity and a reason to strive for better lives, to strive for better relationships with one another, and specifically a relationship with God. This morning, this evening, we'll conclude our study of Ruth. And as I've said before, it's always an exciting time for me because not only are we having an opportunity and having a chance to continue or complete one study, but we're also having an opportunity to begin another. I'm also excited every time we come to an end of a study because when we hit the end of a study, it's the sign that we're going to be beginning another and that we're going to have a chance and an opportunity to embark on a new idea. Specifically with Ruth, we have had multiple things that have shown us what kind of people they were, what kind of lives they lived, and what kind of individuals they turned out to be. And that's exciting to me. If you want to go ahead and be turning over to Ruth chapter 4, Ruth chapter 4, beginning in verse 1, will be our text for this morning, and we'll be there momentarily. For me, anytime I'm looking at the book of Ruth, I'm looking for specific things that have a lot of bearing on this book and on this lesson. This book involves faithfulness. It involves loves. It involves relationships. And so, while we're going through the book of Ruth, let's be striving to help those loves, those relationships, cultivate in our lives. And let's be striving to see different aspects of their relationships, of their love, of their faith, that we need to implement. Follow along with me, if you will, in Ruth chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. And we're going to be going all the way down to verse 10. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." This was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. The one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was the manner of attesting it in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy for yourself," he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders of all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion, and to Mahalath. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahalath, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day." Thank you for following along in that reading with me, and thank you so much for the opportunity that we have. We don't recognize how much of a blessing it truly is to be studying this book. we have before us people who lived in a dark time and yet had so much fun. We have people, individuals in this book, that did not only live a good life, but they strived in everything that they did to make their life an impact on others. The title of this morning's lesson is Boaz Goes to Court. Because that is essentially what takes place here. The majority of our text is a legal proceeding. Something that was taking place, as would today, in a courtroom or in a place of judgment. And for that very purpose, we're dividing the text this morning into 3 specific sections dealing with that. First, preparing for court. And second, we're going to look at the court record. And third, we're going to look at the verdict. Now, I don't mean to say this as a court proceeding and have a verdict on here in the sense that they were judging. They were more or less, the elders of the city were more or less serving as witnesses. This is more or less the recording of a legal procedure than a court case. And I want to make sure that's emphasized. But regardless, it was still a legal proceeding. This was a court case. The first thing that we have to understand to really grasp the idea of this being a court case is that this was the place and the people that signified that. The gates of a city are where their legal things took place. This is where the matters of the city took place. This is where you had all of the happenings. If there was going to be a big declaration of news, it took place at the gates of the city. If there was going to be some execution of sorts, or some form of trial as to whether someone was guilty of a certain crime, it took place at the gates of the city. As a side note, whenever looking back on Jesus' trials, it is interesting to see how many Jewish laws were broken by the Jewish High Council, the Sanhedrin. One of which that it was not included, it was not taking place at daytime. The trial took place at night. Another being that it wasn't taking place at a public area. It was a private, closed doors, secret trial. This was the area you would go to when you needed to have some form of legal proceedings. And whenever you have someone saying that they were going up to the gate, it actually became a saying that was understood that I'm going to court. It became so much associated with the others. See, the gates of a city is where you would have several rooms where the people who were the protectors of the city would be housed, as well as having benches and chairs in separate rooms where these actual judgments would take place. This is where the elders of the city would congregate and where they would be. It was a very large populous center in the city. And so what we have happening here is that these elders who take care of the city affairs are already sitting around. Already at this gate of the city. This isn't something that he had to go around throughout the city and search them out, because this is where they were. So as they're doing this administration for the town, going about their daily duties as the elders of the city, Boaz comes up. And he sits down. It would have been understood by anybody sitting there and watching that he was coming to take care of some kind of legal matters. They may not have understood exactly what it was that he was doing, or what exact matter he might have come on, but they knew he was coming for something. Next, we happen upon something that is extremely interesting to me. What very well might be called God's providence. I'm always careful when dealing with providence for this reason. It is nearly impossible to see providence leading up to something, or while you're in the moment of something. Almost always, providence can only be seen when looking back. Even in matters where it seems like all the stars have aligned, as we might say, when everything seems to be going a certain way, a proper way, we still need to be careful when we declare something to be providence. Look over at Esther chapter 4 and verse 14 with me. Esther chapter 4 and verse 14. Now, Esther is a case in point where you have providence working, where we can see without a doubt that God has put these things in place. You have a lowly Jewish woman, Hadassah, that's Esther's Jewish name, who becomes the queen at the exact time that an enemy of the Jews is coming against them. He's trying to exterminate them. Esther, Hadassah, is put in the exact right place at the exact right time. It's obviously God's providence. Yet what's interesting to me is that Mordecai, her uncle, he doesn't say, now Esther, you have to do this because this is obviously the providence of God. Notice how he says it there in verse 14. Read along with me. For if you keep silent, once again this is Mordecai speaking to Esther, to a messenger. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. That has become a very famous part of the book of Esther and Esther's story, because this is the moment where she is presented with a solution to their problem. Mordecai didn't say, now it is completely obvious to me that you're here for this reason, to save Israel. What did he know? He did know that there would be some kind of deliverance on the part of God to rise for Israel. He just didn't know for sure that it was Esther. He did say that if you don't do anything, being in this position, you will be held accountable for that. But when it came to the point of saying, this is the right thing at the right time, he couldn't go that far. So I'm always careful when dealing with providence at being too declarative, at being imperative that it has to be this way. Yet, right as Boaz sits down, here comes this Redeemer. Here comes this individual that he came to see. You remember what Boaz told Esther? Or told Ruth, I'm sorry, that he would take care of it today. Do you remember what Naomi said to Ruth? He won't rest until he finishes this matter, until he settles it. And as soon as he gets there, here comes the Redeemer, the very man he needs to see. Now, some interesting things about this Redeemer. He's not mentioned by name. Whenever he's addressed by Boaz, he's actually addressed as so-and-so or such as such. It was kind of an idiom used at that time in order to refer to something without using its proper term. The best idea of translation that I can derive is that I went to such and such a place yesterday and did this. Or I saw so-and-so the other day. Now perhaps his name is not included, this individual's name, because of the shame that might arise from not redeeming Ruth and Naomi. That's possible to be. Perhaps his name is just not included because he's not an important part of the story. That could also be a possibility. Yet, some translations say, my friend, come with me. And while that is a Bible translation, I don't think it's the best. Because he doesn't seem to use an endearing term. Just a common, hey you. Hey you guy. Hey so-and-so, come here. And he comes and gathers this individual, this Redeemer, who is a member of his family. In fact, closer member to Elimelech than he is. And then he goes and gets the elders. He goes and gets these elders to be gathered together to witness what's going on and to be aware of the proceedings. He needed the legal representatives of this city to be there. Now, this is, as I said, interesting to me, how everything takes place. Because it's very telling of the people of that time, and it's also very telling of Boaz and Ruth. It also speaks something about Boaz. Here are these elders of the city. They're going about the regular administration of town affairs. And a man walks up and says, follow me, and they do. They get up and follow him. That speaks to Boaz's character. He seems to have been somebody. He at least seems to be somebody of good repute to where the elders would come and attend to his matter. There was other things they had to do. There was other things they could have been, but they came to follow him. So as they all sit down together, we have this court area set in place. We have no doubt, since this is a smaller town than other cities where we do have excavations showing these small rooms with the benches around the edge, that these cities were all much larger than Bethlehem. So this one must have been overflowing with people here. And the court begins. Court is in session. And now we venture to a part of the text that is more or less just a record of what happened. Like the minutes, you might say. And as we go on, it takes place where each individual has their allotted point of talking. And it's interesting how much Boaz says compared to the Redeemer who responds. Boaz presents this opportunity for him. He presents a pretty prosperous venture. He presents a pretty good thing to him. He has an opportunity to redeem land. He has an opportunity to make an expansion. It was very important to God for the land allotments of the different tribes to stay within their tribes. The different tribes of Israel all had their own little part of the land. And it was very important to God that they stay within that. That's why you have this Redeemer principle. And the people understood this very well. You have two different sides to law. You have the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And the Pharisees in Jesus' time tended to get very much so caught up on the letter of the law. The blunt legal perspective, face value. And they would miss the spirit, the heart of the law. The spirit, the heart of the law is the application, the reason behind it. Why weren't you to work on the Sabbath? Well, it was an example of God's rest. 6 days shall work be done, and the Sabbath shall be a holy day of rest to God. It was something given under the law for a specific purpose. They were missing the spirit of the law and just focusing in on the letter. So much so that they even criticized the Messiah for not observing the Sabbath properly. And he corrected them that man was not made for the Sabbath for man. They were missing the spirit of the law. So here, what was the spirit of the law of the Redeemer, of Levirate marriage? Was it just about checking your checklist? Or was it to keep a family from dying in Israel? Was it to keep land from switching hands to a different family? They understood the spirit. That's what made this application possible. The idea of Levirate marriage, where a brother would make sure his brother's name did not die out in Israel, applied to brothers directly under the letter of the law. Yet the men here, the Redeemer, Boaz, and the other elders present, all understood that there was a spirit to this law. There was a deeper purpose. It was not just about the brothers. Even if you were further out, even if you were not directly associated by the family of brother, sister, mother, father, if perhaps you were a cousin, it was understood that there still was that spirit that needed to be satisfied. The family didn't need to die. The land didn't need to go away. So here, as Boaz presents this opportunity to the Redeemer, he tells him, here's this land that's up for grabs. It's Elimelech's land. And the Redeemer jumps at the idea. He answers right away 2 words in Hebrew. I'll redeem. I'll do it. Yet, after that's said, he has a little change of mind. Because Boaz throws in a little bit more information. He says, you also get Ruth. When you acquire the land, literally, when you acquire it, you also acquire Ruth. Now, what's meant there? Why would he acquire Ruth? He's not the brother of Mahalath. He's not another son of Elimelech. Yet he acquires the responsibilities as being a redeemer. He acquires the responsibilities of not only rescuing the land, but rescuing the name. This, the Redeemer was not willing to do. He said it was for the purpose of securing his estate, because if he did redeem the land and also redeem the name of Elimelech, gave his sons, then they would also share the inheritance of his children. That would compromise his children's inheritance. It would compromise everything he had acquired for his posterity. He was not willing to do that. That's when we have the removal of the sandal. This is when we transition from the court record into what I call verdict, or the outcome. Now we have something getting somewhere. Now it's understood at that time about sandals. Yet we may not fully grasp what's going on here. Sandals were not only the main form of shoe wear, what everybody wore. It was not only what everybody had. Yet at that time, whenever there was going to be a purchasing of land, there was a sort of, I don't want to say currency, but a medium that was used. Land was allotted in triangles. And it was based on how much a person could foot out, walk out in a triangle in one day, or 1 week, or 1 month, or 1 year, and so on and so forth. Some interesting Bible background stuff that we can find in references such as the Bible background commentary by IBP and such things help us get an understanding. Why was this sandal important? Because people's foots were different. My size foot's a little bit different from some of the other guys' size foot here. And the sandal became a form of currency, a title, a moving title for each allotted land piece of how much I can walk out with these sandals in a day, a week, a month, a year. So the removal of that sandal was like giving away the title, giving away his ability to have the title of that land. It became so common that they just did it. It was understood the same way we would transfer a title. Now this was very common in regards to a widow and a widow's protector, a widow's caregiver. Whenever she would relieve her caregiver of his duty, she would relieve him of his sandal. Now, there is another aspect to this. It was also a bad omen. If someone would not redeem and do their responsibility, then their sandal will be removed by the person that they would not redeem and be spit on. And their house would forever be known as the house of one whose sandal was removed and would be spit on. That seems like a mouthful to us. It may not be much of something shameful in our eyes, but it was for them. It was deep stuff. You did not want that shame on your family. You did not want to be known as the one who disobeyed God, who was not willing to redeem his family, who was willing to see his brother's name die out in Israel. We may say, what's the big deal if one name dies out in Israel? What does it matter if Naomi and Ruth did not have any children? Thank goodness they did. Thank God they did. Where would we be without Ruth and Naomi's children? What effect can one person really have? The good that Boaz did, the good that Ruth did in sticking with Naomi, what kind of effect can they make? Well, that's the real question, isn't it? This evening's lesson, we're going to get into a little bit more about that good effect that can be had. But I want to give us a small preview right now. Without Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz, King David never would have been born. Without Ruth and Boaz, that lineage that eventually produced Jesus of Nazareth would have ended. This isn't just any family name. This is the family name. Yet, in Bethlehem, it was just Ruth and Naomi. It didn't mean much to them. To this other Redeemer, it was just a widow and a Moabitess, a foreigner. Someone that could compromise the wealth of his posterity. I wonder if he'd also been told by Boaz, by the way, your children's children will eventually produce the Messiah, the one that Israel's waiting for, if that would have changed his mind. What impact can one person have? Can the good that one person's done make? That should be everyone in here's ultimate goal. For us to have a good impact. For the good that we do to be positive. This morning, you can do one of two things. You can, like that Redeemer, Mr. So-and-so, choose to look after yourself. Make the decision to pass. Or, you can do as Boaz did. You can choose to do good. You can choose to take care. You can choose to make the right move. When Boaz took on Ruth and Naomi, he took on Lot. He had 2 widows to provide for them. Not only in life, but he was responsible for making sure that they were properly taken care of in death. This was quite an expense. Redemption comes with a high cost. No one understood that better than one of his descendants, Jesus of Nazareth, who also was a redeemer. Jesus didn't just redeem 2 widows in a family line. He redeemed all of God's children. He redeemed all of the people that would call on his name. All the people that would accept his redemption. This morning, if you have not accepted his redemption, then you're making on of his sacrifice. Then you're spitting on his sandal, bringing shame to his name. He has redeemed you. Will you accept it? The choice is yours. If you would like to make that decision, come right now as we stand and sing together.